Something just broke in Washington. Not a law, not a poll, the chain of command. I'm observing the most powerful political machine on earth, the American presidency, being publicly dismantled by a central banker from Ottawa. Yet, it seems that few fully grasp the magnitude of what has just occurred. Let me be clear. This isn't merely a trade story or a Canada-US story. This is fundamentally a story about power, who possesses it, who has just lost it, and why the world will never view Washington the same way again. What I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes will completely alter your understanding of the geopolitical chessboard that is being redrawn in real time. Buckle up. If you're new to this Sarah Mitchell YouTube channel, subscribe right now and hit the bell because what I'm covering is evolving faster than any mainstream outlet can keep up with. You need to be here first. Let's rewind 72 hours because this didn't begin this morning. It started with a phone call, or rather, a series of phone calls that were never meant to be public. While cable news was fixated on the latest statements from the White House, a quiet operation was underway in Ottawa. Mark Carney's team, trade ministers, economic advisors, senior diplomats, was burning up the lines. They weren't calling the Oval Office or the State Department. They were reaching out to governors, senators, and CEOs of the companies that actually run the American industrial machine. They weren't issuing threats. They were doing something far more effective. They were presenting the math, and that math was terrifying. Let's rewind even further. The trigger was a demand. Trump announced a 25% universal tariff on all goods crossing the Canadian border: oil, cars, lumber, food, everything. He issued the threat with the usual pressure campaign, seeking concessions on the border, dairy, and energy. The ultimatum was clear: comply or pay. Trump believed, as he has with Mexico, NATO, and every negotiating partner he has ever encountered, that the threat alone would suffice. He thought Canada would blink, that Carney would fly to Mar-a-Lago, sit across the table, offer something token, and Trump would declare victory on Truth Social before lunch. That's not what transpired. Announcement number 1, the Senate vote. This one hit the White House like a freight train. At approximately 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the United States Senate passed a bipartisan resolution with a final vote of 74 to 26. The resolution invokes the National Emergencies Act and strips the president of his unilateral authority to impose national security tariffs, so-called Section 232 tariffs, on Canada without explicit congressional approval. Let that sink in. Section 232 has been Trump's trade weapon of choice for years. It's the clause that allows a president to bypass Congress entirely by claiming national security. Trump used it on steel, aluminum, and attempted to use it on Canada last week. Today, Congress locked it away and swallowed the key. 74 senators. In this political climate, the most polarized in modern American history, you cannot get 74 senators to agree on anything. Yet, they agreed on this. 25 Republicans broke with the president, not the usual suspects, not the chronic dissenters. We're talking about senators from deep red states who rely on Trump's endorsement for their political survival. Senators who have supported him on immigration, the courts, and foreign policy walked onto the Senate floor and voted against him. One Republican senator from the Midwest was overheard leaving the chamber. His words caught on a live microphone: "I can't sell a depression to my constituents." Just to make a point. That's not the sound of rebellion. That's the sound of fear, not fear of Trump, but fear of reality. Here's why that matters beyond the headlines. For 4 years, across 2 separate terms, the Republican Party has functioned as a loyalty machine. You back Trump or you face a primary challenge. You back Trump or your funding dries up. You back Trump or the base turns on you at the next town hall. That machine just stalled. The vote wasn't close. It wasn't symbolic. It was overwhelming. The gap between what Trump demanded and what his own party delivered is now a fault line in American politics that will not close. This is receipt number 1. Keep it. Announcement number 2, the letter. This one never made it to the public until now. Just hours before the Senate vote, a letter was leaked to 3 major news organizations. It was addressed to the Senate Majority Leader and signed by the CEOs of 3 of the largest American automobile manufacturers and 5 major American energy companies. These are not small players. They represent companies employing hundreds of thousands of workers in states that determine American elections. The language in the letter was not corporate or hedged. It was blunt in a way that corporate America rarely allows itself to be in a political context. According to Reuters, which obtained a full copy of the letter, the executives warned that if the 25% tariffs on Canada were allowed to take effect Monday morning, assembly lines in Michigan and Tennessee would be forced to halt operations within 48 hours. They warned that gas prices across the Midwest would spike by at least 40 cents per gallon overnight, with no gradual increase. They included a line that reportedly stopped several undecided senators cold, stating, paraphrasing here due to dense legal language, that this was not a negotiation tactic, but a supply chain collapse, a structural failure, not a bluff. Here's what the letter didn't explicitly state, but what every senator in that chamber understood. Carney's team helped build it. Sources close to the Canadian Prime Minister's office, speaking to the Globe and Mail on condition of anonymity, confirmed that Canadian trade officials had been in direct contact with economic teams at several of the signatory companies. They didn't write the letter, but they ensured that the right data was in the right hands at the right time. Canada didn't lobby Congress. Canada educated American business leaders about their own vulnerabilities. And American business leaders did the rest. Stop. Reread that. Canada didn't fight Trump. Canada showed Trump's own allies what Trump was about to do to them. And Trump's own allies pulled the emergency brake. This is receipt number 2. Announcement number 3, the War Room photograph. This one is worth 1,000 words. A photograph began circulating on social media approximately 36 hours before the Senate vote. It was taken inside the Langevin block in Ottawa, the building housing the Prime Minister's office. It shows Mark Carney at a long conference table surrounded by his trade ministers and senior advisors. The table is covered in maps, not of Canada, but of American congressional districts, color-coded and annotated with projected economic impact numbers written in marker alongside specific regions. They weren't planning a defense. They were targeting. They had identified the precise American districts where Canadian trade disruption would cause the most political damage, the districts that produce cars assembled with Canadian parts, the districts that rely on Canadian oil and natural gas, and the districts where farmers sell grain and beef into Canadian supply chains. They ensured that the representatives from those districts understood exactly what Monday morning would look like in their town squares, factory parking lots, and voters' bank accounts. As reported by the CBC and confirmed by Politico, Carney's team had been conducting what one Canadian official described as a precision engagement operation for the better part of a week. Not lobbying in the traditional sense, not asking for favors, but delivering economic intelligence surgically to those who needed it most at the moment they were most ready to act on it. The cameras caught Carney leaving that meeting. A reporter from CTV News shouted a question across the parking lot, asking if he was worried about the president's reaction. Carney didn't stop walking. He adjusted his glasses, glanced briefly at the journalist, and said calmly, almost casually, "The math works for us. I hope the president checks his work." That's not a soundbite. That's a statement from someone who already knows how the story ends. This is receipt number 3. If you're finding this useful, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me if you saw this coming, because most people didn't. I want to know if Sarah Mitchell YouTube channel subscribers were ahead of this one. Now, let's discuss what's truly happening inside the White House, because the vote is only half the story. The other half reveals the internal fractures within the Trump administration. Trump is furious. His press secretary, speaking to reporters on the White House lawn within an hour of the vote, called the Senate resolution an act of legislative sabotage. The word treason appeared in an official White House statement, not in a tweet or at a rally, but in written official White House communications. That is extraordinary. That's a president labeling members of his own party as traitors for exercising their constitutional authority. Understand what that signifies. Trump's inner circle recognizes the gravity of the situation. They know 74 to 26 cannot be spun. They understand the corporate defection cannot be minimized. So, they are resorting to the nuclear rhetorical option, loyalty framing, as it's the only weapon they've left that doesn't require Congress. This indicates something fundamental about where the power balance now lies. The White House is in a state that Washington insiders are describing off the record as controlled panic. Senior advisors are reportedly divided into two camps, one led by economic nationalists pushing for executive action to find a workaround, and the other, including several senior counselors, urging the president to accept the result as a tactical retreat and pivot to other issues. According to Bloomberg, which spoke to two senior White House officials on background, those internal meetings have not been going well. There's another dimension here that most analyses are missing. Trump's trade architecture was built on the assumption that no one would call his bluff. The entire system of Section 232 threats functioned because no one ever put it to a Senate vote. The moment Congress voted, the curtain came down. The wizard is standing in plain sight, and every adversary, every ally, and every trading partner on Earth just witnessed it happen live. Europe is watching. Japan is watching. South Korea is watching. And Beijing, let's be direct, Beijing is watching very, very carefully. So, who is Mark Carney really? To understand this outcome, you must grasp the man who engineered it. He is not a traditional politician. He doesn't come from a family dynasty or have a career built on rallies and retail politics. He is a central banker. He ran the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. He was at the table during the 2008 financial crisis, guiding two G7 economies through the most volatile period in modern financial history. He doesn't read political tea leaves. He reads balance sheets, bond spreads, and systemic risk assessments. When Donald Trump looked at Canada and saw a target, Mark Carney looked at the United States and saw a leverage map. Carney's strategy was never confrontational in the way Trump's was. Trump's approach is dominance through spectacle, the threat, the escalation, the declaration of victory. It works on audiences and cable news, but it doesn't work on a spreadsheet. Carney understood that. He didn't fight the spectacle. He built a parallel reality beneath it. While Trump was publicly threatening tariffs, Carney was quietly building coalitions. He reached out directly to the governors of Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas. He connected with the union leaders who represent the auto and energy workers. He spoke directly to the CEOs. His message was consistent and devastatingly simple. The president is about to hurt you. I have the data. Here's the plan to stop him. I can help you if you help me. This level of diplomatic sophistication was something Washington simply wasn't prepared for. They are accustomed to foreign leaders who come to the White House and ask nicely. They are used to bilateral negotiations where the U.S. sets the terms, and the other side either accepts or resists at the margins. Carney didn't negotiate, he organized. He turned the American political system against itself using nothing but economic data and direct access to the people who actually run things. He also executed something psychologically brilliant. Every time Trump escalated, Carney allowed him to escalate. He didn't match the aggression or feed the spectacle. Instead, he quietly released Canada's retaliation list: bourbon from Kentucky, electronics from Texas, agricultural products from states that hadn't even been in the conversation. Then he stepped back, letting the senators do the math themselves, allowing CEOs to call their lobbyists, and letting the political machine turn on its own gears. The bourbon target was especially precise. Kentucky is home to Mitch McConnell's political legacy, and the bourbon industry there is not just economic, it's a part of cultural identity. Hitting bourbon isn't just about targeting a product, it's about hitting a senator's home. It's personal, and it was designed to be personal. Carney is playing three-dimensional chess while Trump came to the table with a shotgun. Carney brought a surgical laser. Here's the theme that runs through all of this: sovereignty. Carney has consistently framed this conflict not as a trade dispute or an economic negotiation, but as a question of whether Canada has the right to exist as an independent nation with its own economic destiny. That framing resonates. It resonates in Canada, in allied capitals, and even quietly in some corners of American political life where people still believe allies deserve respect. Trump is focused on the next news cycle, while Carney is looking at the next decade. Today, the long game won a very significant hand. Now, let's talk about you. This is not abstract geopolitics. This is about your economy, your wallet, and your job. If you live in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, the states that manufacture cars, process steel, and rely on Canadian oil, you just dodged a bullet. Those tariffs, had they taken effect Monday morning, would have shut down assembly lines within 48 hours. Not metaphorically, but physically. The parts supply chains that feed American auto manufacturing run north-south across that border. There is no substitute for Canadian-sourced components in the timeframe Trump proposed. Zero. The factories would have stopped, and workers would have been sent home. Many of those workers are in counties that Trump won by 20 points. If you pay for gas, and if you're watching this, you nearly faced a 40-cent overnight spike at the pump. Canada is the largest single supplier of energy to the United States, larger than Saudi Arabia or any other single source. You mess with that pipeline, and you don't pay at the diplomatic level. You pay at the gas station every morning before your first cup of coffee. If you own a home, are trying to buy one, or work in construction, lumber prices were about to spike. Canadian softwood lumber feeds the American housing market. With the existing housing affordability crisis, a lumber tariff shock would have compounded an already critical market situation. The vote today didn't just stop a trade war. It halted a cost of living catastrophe that was just 3 business days away. But the bigger picture is this: something structural just shifted. For 80 years, the United States has operated on the foundational assumption that it is the indispensable nation, that it sets the rules, names the price, and the world pays it. When the US president acts like a bully and the US Congress has to step in to stop him from destroying its own alliances, that assumption is cracked. Not broken, but visibly cracked. And the world just saw that crack in high definition. Canada proved something today that will echo far beyond this dispute. It demonstrated that a middle power, a country of 40 million people, not a superpower, not a nuclear state, not an empire, can say no to the United States of America and win. Not by fighting, but by being smarter, by understanding the system better than those running it. If Canada can do it, why not Norway? Why not South Korea? Why not the Gulf states? The playbook is now public. The leverage points are documented. The coalition-building strategy is out in the open. Every capital that has faced American economic coercion just witnessed a masterclass in how to push back. This is a seismic shift in global power dynamics, and it happened in a Senate chamber this afternoon. Now, let's discuss what comes next, because this is not over. Not by a long shot. I see 3 paths forward, and none of them are comfortable. Path 1, the workaround. This is the most likely scenario and has probably already begun. Trump cannot use Section 232 tariffs on Canada anymore. Congress took that weapon away. However, he has others. He can order enhanced border security inspections, legitimate on paper, devastating in practice, that slow commercial traffic to a crawl. He can invoke other executive authorities and instruct federal agencies to complicate life for Canadian businesses operating in the U.S. He doesn't need new tariffs to create economic pain. He just needs to weaponize existing bureaucracy. Expect delays at the border, permitting complications, and a slow-motion squeeze that doesn't give Canada a clean legal target to fight against. As reported by Politico, Trump's trade team began internal discussions about alternative mechanisms within hours of the Senate vote. The war is not over. The battlefield has simply changed. Path 2. The legal war. The White House is actively reviewing whether to challenge the Senate resolution in federal court, arguing that the National Emergencies Act gives the president powers that supersede congressional constraints in trade matters. If this goes to the Supreme Court, it could create 6 to 18 months of total legal uncertainty. Markets despise uncertainty more than they dislike bad news. Businesses freeze investments, and supply chains go into contingency mode. The economic damage of a prolonged legal battle could paradoxically end up being nearly as severe as the tariffs themselves. This is the slow bleed scenario. Path 3. The pivot. This is the least likely option and the one requiring the most political self-awareness, which this White House has historically struggled to demonstrate. Trump could declare victory, claiming that the Senate vote was actually a result of his negotiating strength. He could assert that Canada made concessions real or invented and announce that, due to his brilliant tactics, the tariffs are no longer necessary. He has done this before with Mexico and USMCA. The mechanism is familiar. The problem is his own social media feed. As of this recording, he is not pivoting. He is escalating. He is attacking the senators who voted against him by name, threatening primaries, and promising to defund infrastructure projects in their home states. A wounded political animal is the most dangerous kind. Carney knows this. The Canadian military remains on elevated alert. The trade war rooms in Ottawa are not celebrating. They understand that while the opening battle has been won, the war is still ongoing. The world changed today, not with a missile, not with an army, but with a vote and a quiet man in glasses who did his homework, built his coalitions, and let the math do the talking. Congress drew a line. They chose economic stability over political loyalty. That choice will define the legacy of this moment in American history. When future historians write about when the Republican Party reasserted its institutional independence, they may point to this afternoon, or they may write that it was a single exception, swallowed back up by the machine. We don't know yet. What we do know is this. Mark Carney walked into a fight that everyone assumed Canada would lose. He walked out having not just survived, but having fundamentally altered the power dynamics of North America. He proved that sovereignty is not about size. It's about strategy. It's about doing the work, reading the room, building relationships, and knowing exactly where to apply pressure and when. Trump is down, but he is not out. The next 3 weeks will test the American constitutional system in ways we haven't seen since Watergate. The institutions are holding barely, but holding. Here at the Sarah Mitchell YouTube channel, we will track every development in real time. If you're not subscribed, do it now. This is moving fast, and the mainstream headlines are always 12 hours behind. Before I go, I want to leave you with questions that I genuinely don't have the answers to yet. These are the ones keeping me up tonight. Did Congress do the right thing? They protected economic stability, jobs, and alliances. But did they also just inform every future president that Congress will check their trade authority? Does that weaken American negotiating power forever, or does it strengthen it by making the U.S. a more reliable and predictable partner? Is Carney protecting Canada, or is he daring Trump to escalate into even more dangerous territory? Every move Carney has made has been brilliant, but brilliant moves in chess sometimes bait your opponent into sacrificing their queen. What happens when Trump stops playing chess and flips the board? And the deepest question, when the dust settles, when the tariffs are gone or transformed, when the legal battles are resolved, and when the next election resets the pieces, which country emerges from this stronger? The one that started with more power, or the one that used its power more wisely? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. This conversation is just getting started, and you need to be here for what comes next.